All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today we're going to be talking all about Michael Jackson and some of the legal issues associated with his life and career. Now, this is mostly a true crime channel, and I don't think we've ever done a sort of true crime upload in this way where it's actually talking about kind of just allegations against somebody. Now, when we want to look at this particular case, we can't really get too far without bringing up the documentary Leaving Neverland. And this is something that I confess I have not seen yet, but I was listening to a little bit of the commentaries, a little bit of the kind of discussions that people were having online, and it's kind of brought back to the surface all of the kind of accusations that were against Michael Jackson. This first really took place in the 1990s, and I remember though back when I was no, I don't even remember how old, but in the early new millennium, something around 2002, 2003, he was accused a second time. Like he went on trial a second time for the allegations, and there was a lot of media coverage. And I believe it was the E Network that was doing a show where like they couldn't have cameras in the courtroom, so what they did was they had actors reenact it all. But the fact of the matter was, he was accused a second time, and both times he was found, what would you say, acquitted. He was acquitted, exonerated, all of those things. What do you make of Michael Jackson? Do you think that he is guilty of sexual abuse of minors, child molestation, um, rape, all sorts of sex acts, indecent exposure, all of these things? Like, he's been accused of a lot of stuff, but like, what are people really going to make of this? When I've been scrolling through the comments on other videos, I really found that there is an enormous wave of people who are coming to his defense. And a lot of people are calling them out as just be like, oh, you're fans of his music, you don't want to see the truth. And the other side is like, no, he was acquitted twice. He didn't do these things. These people just want money. And it seems like the people who did make the documentary Leaving Neverland have sued the Michael Jackson estate for hundreds of millions of dollars. There are a lot of things that we really need to go through, so let's get right to it. Back when the second round of allegations were about, and they had come about, I was someone who was not a fan of Michael Jackson's music. I guess I am now as an older person because, well, I mean, I think that happens. But when I was much younger, I wasn't a fan of his music because that was still during the Wacko Jacko time. Like prior to Michael Jackson's death, he was a social pariah. And it had nothing to do with child molestation. It just everybody thought he was weird. He was the guy trying to sleep in the hyperbolic chamber, hyperbarian chamber, whatever that was called. And they also disapproved of his lifestyle, not even playing with kids so much as just having all the animals in his backyard and blowing all his money on junk and they just thought that he was really weird. They thought that his music was deteriorating, like his songs like "You Rock My World," and was really panned by the critics. Everything since the Dangerous album had been pretty much kind of looked down upon, with a few exceptions. There are a few songs that people kind of look to in the late '90s that they like, but very very few in comparison to the mid 1980s with things like Thriller. But the fact of the matter is, he was a social pariah. The media hated Michael Jackson prior to his death. And I remember very clearly that as soon as he passed away, everybody just had this kind of Michael Jackson revival. It was now socially acceptable to talk about Michael Jackson in a positive light and to talk about his music. People forgot the allegations. They forgot them. The mainstream media forgot them. The MSM didn't care anymore. So then Michael Jackson started being played everywhere. But what do you really make of this? Because I was somebody in the early new millennium who defended Michael Jackson without being a fan of him. Why would I do that? Well, I did look at the situation and I was like, well, it's like, it seems like it just didn't seem like that. It seemed like the people were trying to get money. That's what the first thing I thought. It's like they accuse him of stuff, and I was like, wait a second, innocent until proven guilty. I mean, I was like a teenager at the time, innocent until proven guilty. I didn't see the smoking gun, no concrete evidence. Everything that was against him was pretty much hearsay, his word against somebody else's. And I also found that the explanations provided were somewhat convincing to me at the time as a teenager. I'm a little more skeptical now. But even just the whole fact when he has an amusement park in his backyard. He said he did it because he never had a childhood or something, so he wants to live like that. That didn't even seem beyond belief to me as someone who was a 14 or 15-year-old. Then for a while, during that trial, Mike, I kind of flipped my conscience and I was just like, wait a second. It's like the people who, I believe the boy who accused him the second time, I think his name was Gavin or something like that. I believe they went through the trial and they did not file a lawsuit. They only sought legal action against him. And I didn't know what to make of that. So I was like, well, I mean, if they aren't doing it for money, then somebody brought up a point that they could just ask him for a settlement later on because the first boy that accused Michael Jackson, there might have been multiple accusers, but like during the first round of accusations against Michael Jackson in the 90s, they didn't get the money from the lawsuit. They dropped the suit because Michael Jackson settled with them, like a settlement, right, for an undisclosed sum. They got an enormous settlement out of it, and Michael Jackson was just like, "Hey, these people want money." And the people who did do Leaving Neverland are suing for hundreds of millions of dollars. But back when I was a teenager, I was just like, the biggest thing that people are saying against Michael Jackson is all just hearsay. They're talking about things that no one can corroborate. They're talking about things that people didn't witness. And in terms of just like evidence, I mean, the sort of kind of smoking gun that you would need to do that, like, I mean, it just doesn't seem to be there. And that's why probably he was acquitted and exonerated of all this stuff two times. Do you think that some people, though, are kind of refusing to accept the possibility that Michael Jackson would have been guilty of this because they are fans of his music? Absolutely, there are people that are going to go to that extreme. And I don't really think that that's the right course either because, if somebody did do this, then they did do this. And somebody left a comment on one of the kind of discussions about this when they were like, hey, Michael Jackson's dead. He's been dead for years. There's no point in bringing it back up. And I don't really agree with that because the fact of the matter is, like I mentioned that this is mostly a true crime channel. So, well, what we try to do, right, is to get the truth. We try to get the truth about everything. And sometimes, we need the actual story, even if it's not what we want to hear. Maybe it's a better story or it's more comforting to believe, like something about a person. But if it comes a time though when maybe you would need to know the truth. And I just saw that on Twitter that The Simpsons will no longer air any reruns of their episode that featured Michael Jackson. Like when Homer's in the mental institution and he meets Michael Jackson and well, the guy that sounds like him anyway. They will no longer air that. So it's actually having some backlash. These kind of accusations now are coming into a kind of a world where they aren't just words. They aren't just people talking. They aren't just individuals, saying something and then it's going back to the way it used to be. There actually are going to be repercussions larger than a lawsuit. Like, are places going to stop airing his music? This is kind of just a total social question. Do you think if someone were accused of something like that, we're talking about, sexual abuse, rape, sexual assault, molestation, that you could still appreciate their art? Because with so many people nowadays, stuff like that has been happening. Like, I mean, this is way past the Me Too movement. We're just in a completely different world. What I would say, the first thing I would say is that back when Roman Polanski was being tried again, like Roman Polanski, of course, the movie director, he was accused of something with an underage girl, and we decided, one of my kind of, I guess, classmates from university and I decided that we were going to separate, his personal life and that all of those legal things from his work, like sort of just for the fact of saying no comment about anything, associated with his personal life, but hey, this is a good movie that he made. Is that the appropriate course of action for Michael Jackson, just to be like, whatever people are accusing him of, I like this song that he did, I like this album that he did. Is that the appropriate course of action? What I can say is anything to the contrary is like somewhat dishonest unless you genuinely dislike his music. I mean, if you think that he made some good songs, then he made some good songs. you can sort of appreciate that on your own terms. But what the big thing is like, are radio stations going to continue to play his music? Is he still going to be viewed, like, is he going to leave behind a legacy as, one of the greatest entertainers, like the king of pop? Is he going to be remembered as that, or is he going to be remembered as a rapist? And this will actually affect things associated with, like radio play, airtime on television, as well as just the overall just Michael Jackson experience of everything. But what I would say about all of this is just that I'm not 100% sure if that's actually going to kind of break down the kind of legend that was Michael Jackson. I'm not completely certain of that. But what I would say is that, I mean, yes, you can still appreciate someone's art and not necessarily comment on the things that they've done in their personal life. I mean, if you were to do that, then you would be getting rid of half the movies you own and probably deleting a lot of music. You want to go delete your R. Kelly songs right now, I wouldn't blame you for that, but maybe you were singing along with, like, I Believe I Can Fly or something like that, or Trapped in the Closet. Maybe that's a better example. But the fact of the matter is, even if you do appreciate something that somebody did in the past, like, say, we meant to be like Roman Polanski or Michael Jackson, if you appreciate their work, it doesn't necessarily mean that you would continue to accept anything from them in the future. Yeah, okay, you made a good movie in the past, you made some good songs in the past. It doesn't mean that you would accept things from them in the future or continue to be a fan of that. And of course, yes, I'm fully aware that Michael Jackson is now deceased and wouldn't be producing any more music, but we're talking about future generations of people. The stuff isn't going anywhere. But back to the actual crime. Once again, I haven't seen the documentary Leaving Neverland. I would like to. More or less, I would say that the stuff that I have heard, though, from, the little interview clips that are put out, it's kind of like very graphic, very detailed. Um, and, like, one of the big things we have to question is, do the individuals associated with this film have a motivation to lie? Yes, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. They do have a motivation to do that. Would they lie about it? Possibly. It's plausible, but it's not certain. That's the biggest issue that I dealt with, like during the trial about, 15 years ago, when I was just like, it's just he said, he said. It's just like you have two people, or one is saying yes and the other saying no, and that's all I was left with. And then when I was discussing this with my family way back when, we're talking over a decade ago, I just remember that they were like, "We know he's doing it. Everybody knows he's doing it. Everyone knows he's guilty of this stuff." And I was like, "Well, now wait a second. How do you know with certainty that he's guilty?" They're like, "Just look at the situation. It's obvious. Look at Neverland Ranch." And I was like, I admit it's a different setup. I admit that Neverland Ranch is not exactly something that most people do, that not even most famous entertainers do. But I was like, is that definitive certainty that someone is guilty? I mean, just because they have like a Ferris wheel and a carousel and like a small little roller coaster thing in their backyard, and they also have a giraffe in a cage or whatever, is that definitive certainty of guilt? And yes, I'm aware that he admitted to things like sleepovers and such, but is that definitive certainty of these abuses that they are describing? Because the guys aren't just saying, "Oh yeah, I shared a bed with Michael Jackson, and like he slept on my shoulder or something like that." No, they're like accusing him of things like rape. They're accusing him of bending over. Excuse me. They're accusing him of forcing them to bend over while he masturbated until completion, and it was just like kind of using them as like visuals, stimulatory aids, as well as actually getting physical with them and forcing oral sex upon boys 7 or 8 years old. I mean, he's accusing them of much more than that, but I was just like, at the time, way back when, I was like, I did not really feel that there was the definitive certainty to kind of convict him in the court of public opinion the way that people were. Now I'm a little more skeptical. I'm a little more skeptical of Michael Jackson. I would say, though, that we're going through a lot of the same old, same old. Like, we have this documentary out there called Leaving Neverland, right? What somebody left in the comments section again was they should make another documentary that is pro Michael Jackson, right? And I was just like, holy crap, we did this 15 years ago. This was the whole Martin Bashir thing called Living with Michael Jackson. They did kind of an expose on Michael Jackson's life. And Michael Jackson hired his own camera crew to film alongside them. And I forget the title of the one that he made. He produced something about, his own life. They were filming side by side, and they had kind of showed how the Martin Bashir documentary, Living with Michael Jackson, really edited and cut up a lot of his stuff about, whether, like, they completely cut out the thing about him having vitiligo because they didn't want people to become sensitive to that. They cut out the thing about him having an injury from pyrotechnics in the 1980s, and that's part of his plastic surgery was to correct, the injury from the burns that he suffered from. And they show that how they really were trying to create this kind of image that Michael Jackson, is this kind of character that we saw on television, but in reality, you just saw that it was the media misleading people. And then again, like, I found that very convincing, but at the same time, once again, in 2019, I'm a little bit more skeptical of documentaries. Somebody told me that around that same time. They said, documentaries are too one sided. That's what they said. Documentaries are too one sided. And that really is the case with a lot of them. They only give you part of the facts. And we had these two things going on. We had the Martin Bashir documentary giving you some of the facts, and then Michael Jackson's documentary giving you some of the facts. Now we have Leaving Neverland. Well, which side are you going to believe? And that's what I'm going to leave it at there and kind of just ask you that question. Once again, just to recap, I would sort of say that I kind of defended Michael Jackson a lot in the past without being a fan of his music. Now I'm much more skeptical and I'm kind of more aware of the situation, and I think that the allegations are a little bit more plausible. But at the same time, I think a lot of the evidence put forward is hearsay and testimony as opposed to other forms of evidence. What do you think? What would you have to say about this? If you have anything to say at all, if you want to challenge any of the points,